Man, I love these old model pistols. I wonder what it would look like after like 9 years of development, though. Oh my god, they changed the color. FN High Powers. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to Classic Firearms. I'm Matt, and today we've got an exciting bunch of pistols to take a look at here. We're talking about FN High Powers. We're doing a little bit of an unboxing as well as a bit of a stroll down memory lane, so it's a really exciting kind of combo fit. I'm super happy to be here today. The FN High Power, right? So very classic design, and it stems, like a lot of things, from kind of the intra-war period, right? So we're talking between World War I and World War II, when there was a lot of firearms development, as well as, and you're gonna hear this name a lot, John Moses Browning. So obviously super famous firearm designer from the US. And how do these things come together? How do we get FN and John Moses Browning together? Well, basically the French military government issued a tender. They wanted to have a trial for a new replacement military pistol. And one of the people who wanted to bid on this contract was FN. So that's Fabrique Nationale du Herstal. And they're in Belgium, and they contracted with John Moses Browning in order to design a new semi-automatic pistol that would meet the requirements of the French military. So they had a number of requirements. So it had to do with size and weight. It had to have a capacity of at least 10 rounds. Had to have an external hammer and a magazine disconnect. So John Moses Browning, being a very well-known, even at the time, designer, was contracted. Now, one of the complications for this is that, John Moses Browning had actually sold the patents for the 1911, obviously another famous design that he had created, to Colt. So he didn't own the rights to use any of the patented features of that pistol. So when he was going into this, he had to find workarounds, ways to avoid using some of those same features he had just created to create a new semi-automatic pistol design. And it was kind of interesting. So he filed for patents in 1923 on his kind of new pistol design. And unfortunately, he passed away in 1926. Now, those patents were then issued by the US government in 1927, but there was an incomplete pistol, right? It had not been fully developed yet. So one of the features that he was utilizing was a staggered capacity magazine. So, obviously 1911 was a single stack. The High Power uses a double stack magazine, and the designer of this magazine was a man named Save, who is an employee of FN in Belgium. So the designers there at FN decided to give the High Power design to Save in order to finish its development. Now, it continued to kind of compete in trials for a number of years and went through a number of improvements. So as an example, the patents owned by Colt expired kind of in the early 1930s. And so he was able to go back and incorporate some of those design features back into the High Power. And in fact, the FN originally listed the pistol in their catalog before they were completed with development. They were hoping to maybe get some commercial sales in order to kind of help boost and finance the development of the product. Ultimately, the French government did not adopt the High Power pistol. They went with the somewhat similar but smaller Model 1935, but the Belgian army did in fact adopt the High Power, and they adopted it as the P35 in 1935. So after that, there have been a large number of adopters of the High Power. In fact, it was used by both sides during World War II. So after Germany invaded Belgium, they captured the FN facility, and they continued to produce pistols, as Germany was wont to do with manufacturing that they captured in territories. And so they issued the pistol to German forces, and you can see variations of the High Power that have Wehrmachts, or German kind of proof markings on them. The plans were also exported through England to Canada, where the Inglis factory produced them for Commonwealth nations, parts of countries that were kind of ruled by Great Britain. And so you will have Inglis marked pistols that were issued by several militaries through the Commonwealth throughout World War II, such as Canada, Britain, down in Australia and things. But over like 90 militaries through like 50 different countries have adopted the High Power at one point or another. So it is a prolific design that has gone through continuous improvement. And so we're going to kind of go through some of these pistols and take a look at some of the differences that you can expect, as well as the conditions you can expect. FN did cease production in 2018, but that did not last very long. So by about 2022, they brought the production back. In the meantime, several other players got into the game. So there was TSUS for a short period of time. Gearson, Springfield Armory creates the SA-35. So there are a number of producers out there who are making either trying to be historically accurate with a military issue style pistol or modern renditions of the high power pistol. So even with a design as old as it is, there are still more modern takes, and I think it's still a very capable pistol. So why don't we start taking a look at some of the conditions and features. Over here on my left, we have some of the kind of most modern designs that are not commercial with modern features, if that makes sense. So these are like the Mark IIIs, the things that kind of started coming out later. And so some of the features that you will notice is that there is no drain hole here in the front of the slide. It does have the ambidextrous safety. It has the exposed extractor here on the outside. And it has that nice black finish with the plastic grips. So this would be a great example. Now, of course, here on the slide, we do see wherever there's a hard line, there's going to be usually some wear. Overall, I think the finish on this one looks really good. There's very minimal scratching in the grips. So again, this is going to be the same kind of thing. This is a Mark III. And again, that beautiful, very kind of shiny finish. Yeah, again, these are all 9mm. So the high power is a single action design, although there have been variations of it that are both double action and double action only, and even in various other calibers. So there are, I know 40 and I believe 357 SIG variations of the high power, but these are all in the original 9mm single action design. Here again, we have a kind of a different finish. So this is, I'd call it nickel, maybe you could call it chrome. And you can see a difference here where it's somewhat matte here, but on the sides, it's been somewhat polished and it's a little bit more chrome looking. This one actually comes with, some kind of different base plate. But yeah, let's take a look here. Just double check that the action's clear. So you have that single action trigger pull, it'll drop the hammer. But then if the hammer is down, if I pull the trigger, nothing happens here. This one has just the single-sided safety. It doesn't have the safety on the opposite side. But again, lots of interesting variations in this. There's a whole lot, a whole group of people who collect these things, and they just go crazy over the various small differences. So on this pistol, again, we can see that there's no drain hole on the front, which indicates to us that this is kind of a Mark III type pistol, although it does lack the ambi safety on this pistol as well. Obviously, this one has some kind of aftermarket Hogue style, rubberized grips, as opposed to the harder plastic grips that are on here. These look like they're Packmeyers. So you're going to have variation on grips as well as, the finish. Now, when it comes to the finish, you'll likely see them listed that way. However, when it comes to the grips, I believe it's kind of more luck of the draw. This one indicates that this is probably a military or police pistol because, we see the lanyard ring as opposed to on pistols where you see that the grip doesn't have any cutout to allow for a lanyard, and you don't see the two, spaces where maybe a lanyard loop previously was. Those were likely not made for military service. This one, on the other hand, does have that lanyard loop present. So it is likely that this was a military or police issue style pistol. Here's that drain hole we were talking about. And so this is kind of the improved pistol that came out through, kind of like the 1960s. We can see that it still has the exterior extractor, unlike the early models that have an interior extractor, and I believe we'll get to see some of those here in just a second. Also, differences in sights, right? So we have here a 3-dot kind of sight arrangement with a fairly low profile rear sight. And if we compare that to the pistol I had a second ago, much more substantial front and rear sights, not as small and low profile as these. So again, there's going to be quite a bit of variation due to the duration and longevity of the pistol. Ignoring the last three sections, again, these are all marked as made by FN in Belgium. So that is really a cool piece of history, and we're going to talk about these pistols once we get down there. This one has a little bit more wear. I definitely feel like you should be able to see on the slide that there's a substantially larger amount of finish wear. However, keep in mind that sometimes wear on a pistol just helps tell its story, right? You know, while this is cosmetically worn, that doesn't mean that there's anything mechanically that's going to happen with the firearm. And since these are, you know, very solid pieces of engineering, I doubt that there's going to be any kind of performance issue with this.
That's my favorite one so far.
Right? Because so, like I said, sometimes when you, especially if you're someone who's into the surplus market, seeing something that's got a little bit of wear, I mean, you got kind of the original style grips, and with that finish wear, it's like this has jumped out of a history book, right? I mean, fantastic. So they do come with 13 round double stack magazines. Each pistol will only have one. But you know, what's some of the great things about this is that because of the fact that there are modern people producing high powers and that they've been produced for so long, magazines are one of those things that's super easily available, right? So this one's got a little bit less wear, still more wear than, you know, some of the ones we've seen before here. But yeah, I mean, I think they're really cool. Now, one thing is that they're very easy to maintain because of their metal construction and the fact that they were designed, one of the original specifications was that they should be easy to take down and clean. So they utilize a takedown method quite similar to a 1911, where there's a takedown pin here. One thing I think that we didn't quite cover in detail was how does it differ from 1911? We talked about how he couldn't use all of his original designs. So how does it differ from a 1911? Well, obviously caliber, so 9mm, double stack magazine, but in its operation, this is a short recoil locking action. So the barrel locks with the slide for a short distance as it travels back, and then there's a cam pin underneath the chamber that stops the barrel and brings it down out of connection with the slide. The slide then continues to go all the way to the rear, and you know, ejecting a cartridge as it moves forward, it picks up that next cartridge. But unlike a 1911, which uses a cam toggle to pull that barrel out of joining with the slide, this is a linkless design. Also, unlike a 1911 where the barrel bushing is a separate piece, the barrel bushing on this is it's incorporated into the slide. So it is very interesting to see how he had to kind of recreate the wheel in a sense when John Moses Browning had to originally come up with the design for the high power, or grande puissance if you want to be kind of like French and fancy, right? Here we've got one of the examples of an earlier high power. So some of the things we can notice is what we call the thumbprint here, indentation here in the slide, as well as there's no visible exterior extractor. So this has an internal extractor. Now, this is still a very workable design. However, the reason they went to the exterior extractor is because it is stronger, and of course, it is easier to replace if there is a problem where it breaks, right? So, you know, this would be an example of an earlier design. Also, we can see that skeletonized hammer back here, as opposed to the later pistols using a solid hammer spur that's a little bit less, a little bit more low profile. Here we've got another great example of an early high power. And I do have to say though, like as far as the like aesthetic appearance, these early high powers are just fantastic. You know, they've got the wood grips instead of the polymer grips. You know, I think that the thumbprint is just part of the iconic look of a high power. But again, you've still got that same, you know, that same semi-automatic action 9mm 13 round capacity. As far as the performance goes, there's so much that you can have out of this pistol, even though it would have been produced somewhere, you know, between 1935 and the early 1950s when these features would have been changed. Now we've gotten to the end of the table here. So all of these pistols made in Belgium. Of course, like we've stated before, there are a number of users all around the world, and many of them license the design to be able to produce them domestically. So these last pistols are actually made in Hungary by FEG. So these are still high-power designs, but they're not made in Belgium. Now, they're otherwise basically identical, so they still use the same 13-round magazine, and they are the exact same operation. So get a good look at that. Of course, it looks like it is in some ways copying the earlier designs when we look at, say, like the skeletonized hammer and the sights. However, in some ways it is copying the later transition models where there is an exterior extractor and no thumbprint. So it's interesting they kind of mix and match some of these features that we've seen on the table so far. But, you know, again, if we look here, you know, that's marked made in Hungary here on the slide. And so, they made them in a number of countries. Canada, you'll very often hear of T series. So Canada, when they made pistols for use by Commonwealth nations, the serial number would have had a T as the second letter. And they also made a number of Chinese contract pistols for the Chinese Commonwealth that had a CH in the middle of the serial number. And those pistols were often, there was a provision here on the rear that allowed a stock to attach, and then you could shoot it kind of like you might have seen some other pistols from the, kind of World War I, World War II era as a stocked pistol. That design was pretty quickly, taken away. It just wasn't found to be something that was actually of great assistance, I guess, to the Allied forces, but it was still part of the design for the Chinese contract pistols. So I definitely think, when we talk about what makes a cool collectible firearm, right? So the fact that we can see this was used on both sides of World War II by both the Germans and the Allies, the fact that it's been used by so many countries around the world, the fact that it's still something that is being produced and in demand today. There's not a lot of things that it doesn't tick the box for when it comes to a really cool collectible pistol. And it still has phenomenal functionality for a modern day shooter, right? So if you were looking for something to carry and you are okay with a full size pistol, again, 13 round capacity isn't the greatest. It isn't the most that you can get out of a 9mm pistol today, but it's certainly, I feel, an adequate capacity. We're not talking about like an 8-round magazine. And you could not ask for a better round than 9mm as far as, availability for ammo and the variety of ammo available today. And even with the single action design, so these were kind of designed to be carried what we would maybe refer to as condition 1 or cocked and locked. So you can simply, chamber around, have the hammer cocked, and then engage the magazine. And this was a way that it was intended to be carried. So as far as being able to deploy it in a ready way, all you have to do is flip off the safety and then you're able to fire the firearm and you are ready to go. So, again, I think that as far as the history goes, it's a super interesting story. One of the, basically the last design of John Moses Browning, such that he didn't even get to see the complete development of the pistol. And as far as the functionality of it goes, again, fantastic. It's a super platform that can still be used today. So again, wanted to get out these pistols on the table where you can see the just variety of small differences in features and how the history of it kind of progressed from sort of the earliest pistols through some of the later pistols, as well as give you a little taste of how widespread and copied of a design this was, sometimes with license and sometimes without license, right? So, again, I think the High Power is a phenomenal platform, and I'm certainly sure that there are those of you out there who would be interested in adding one to your collection or adding another to your collection if you're someone who likes to collect all the different variations. But yeah, guys, definitely check out Classic Firearms, and we love to have you guys let us know what it is you're looking to see. So if you enjoyed walking down history lane and talking a little bit about the development of the High Power line, and there's a different platform or firearm that you would like to talk about the history of, please feel free to let us know down in the comment section. But yeah, again, we appreciate you coming down. You have a great day, and God bless.